What does your budget look like weekly?
I spend about 16% on food and entertainment. That includes groceries, eating out, and then I kind of lump other entertainment in there, like, I don't know, if I go to the movies or do something like that. And then up until recently, 26% on mortgage and house bills, but currently I'm house sitting for 3 months, so there are no outgoings on that front. And then generally save and invest around 40%. I've had to scale that back to like 35 depending on how much I've been making, but generally it's always set at 40%, 14% on health related things and 4% on other bills. Currently, because my take home pay is so high, I'm actually investing or saving 80%, which is ludicrous. It feels like, oh my God, wow, this is amazing. I can really accelerate some of the goals that I have. The only thing is I'm like, oh, do I want an investment property or do I need to catch up on investing? And so I'm kind of weirdly trying to do both.
Welcome to It's No Secret, a podcast for Kiwis who want their money questions answered.
Ready, steady, go.
This podcast will answer the money questions you may or may not have on your mind. We'll talk to real Kiwis and share truths about our own financial lives.
Both the successes and the failures. Because the truth is, there is no secret to achieving financial freedom.
Hello and welcome to It's No Secret. I'm Christine and today we're back with another Money Moments episode where we chat to real Kiwis about their experience with money. Today we're joined by loyal podcast listener Elise Dalrymple-Keast, who has so kindly said yes to sharing all about her money journey. Now, Elise and I actually met at a marketing event recently, or relatively recently, where we got chatting and figured out that outside of us both being in the marketing space, Elise was actually a big fan of the podcast. So one thing led to another, and here we are. Yeah, so welcome, Elise. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here and excited to get stuck in because I think we have a lot in common with our kind of underlying money psychology and habits. So very excited to dig into that. With the podcast, we always start right back at the beginning. So that is the root of your relationship with money kind of growing up. So I would love to hear what your earliest memories of money are and how this has shaped how you approach money today.
Yeah, so I was very lucky in that I came from a family who talked a lot about financial literacy. I think my earliest memory is having a star chart, like stuff when you're a toddler, like potty training and putting away toys. And my parents had a rule where once I filled the star chart, I got a $2 coin and I got to go to the $2 shop. And my mum said that very quickly they had to increase the number of tasks on the star chart because I was bankrupting them. I was just so financially motivated. I was just like, oh my God. She's like, we don't need another porcelain dolphin in the house. Need to rein it in. So I think that was my first signs of me being quite financially motivated. And then my parents were always very good at essentially explaining spend less than what you earn and putting aside money. And if I wanted things, I needed to save up. And so the first example of me saving up for something I wanted is I really wanted a dog at about age 10, wanted a puppy. And so Dad said, oh yeah, if you buy one yourself, thinking, what money does a 10-year-old have? You're never going to be able to buy a dog. And so I would look at the buy, sell and trade newspaper. I don't even know if that's still a thing. And then see what was available. And I saw that dogs were roughly $100. And I was like, okay, good. And so for months, I squirreled away every coin, everything I could find. And then one day Dad was clearing out his wallet. I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe school holidays were coming up and he gave me a $20 note, which never happened. I never ever got notes and he gave me a really big one. And I knew that I had $80 already in coins in my little money box. And so he gave it to me. I ran down to my room, grabbed the coins, tipped them out on the floor and started counting out. Like I had $100 and like showed the dog that I wanted in the buy, sell and trade. And Dad's face was just like, oh my God, what have I done? So I got the dog. And so I
respect the fact that they kept their promise, even though
I think he was like, if I tell my 10-year-old who somehow saved $100 and mostly coins that no, she doesn't get what I promised, that's going to be like a really bad lesson.
Disaster,
yeah. So which was good that he followed through. And then we bought the dog and we did hand over a plastic bag with $80 in coins and then a $20 note to the guy.
Was he like, oh, what do I do with this?
Literally, he kind of just like looked at my dad and then back to me and like the look he gave my dad was like, you knew.
Why did you bring this in?
Yeah. But he was like, oh, it's kind of cute.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I think that was the first example I had of, like the power of being able to save up and achieve things on your own. So I always knew the value of being able to save towards a goal and the power of that. And then on top of that, I was just told a lot, not spending money that you didn't have. So debt wasn't really something that I ever even considered. Aside from mortgages, my dad did own a couple of rental properties, and so I knew that the only debt that I wanted aside from a student loan would be a mortgage one day, but never ever, I still don't have a credit card now because of the deep fear within myself of credit cards. So I guess that's where my money journey started. Now, as an adult, I'm really good with my money. I think the only thing that I do find holds me back is the level of which money was discussed. Sometimes I do have a little bit of a mindset of lack, and I have this inclination to need to pull all of my money and really hold on to it. And so sometimes that means I struggle to make decisions about, for the longest time I procrastinated investing because I was just like, oh my God, no, because that's uncertain. That's an uncertain place to put my money, and then that's going to be other things, or struggling to spend on health, which I now have overcome in many ways, which we'll get to, but really struggling to invest on things that were actually really important for my well-being, because I was like, well, no, that's frivolous, that I should be saving this money.
So because you mentioned that your dad owns property, so that's like an investment, right? Did you talk about investing, the difference maybe between saving and investing? Was that ever a discussion?
Yes, so he always said, the earlier you can get on the property ladder, the better. You've got way longer to pay off that mortgage, and then because his retirement plan was always to have rental properties, have them mortgage free, and live off the rent. And so he was like, the earlier you start, the better. When it came to any other kind of investing, he was always like, it's gambling. It's just gambling. And so that was the belief that I had for years until I came across initially She's on the Money podcast when I was probably like 22, and then slowly got more into it from there, and then eventually got my dad onto shares and stuff.
Good. So he now invests.
But I think
maybe dabbling.
Dabbling, and then the whole they were really good because they invested around COVID, and now they're really bad. Again, I'm like, it's not the long-term strategy. But we do talk about money a lot and investing in property, and
that's awesome. And do you have any siblings?
I have two stepbrothers, but I'm biologically my parents' only child.
And so did you were they with you growing up? So was there conversations with your siblings about money, or? Not
quite to the same extent. So my two stepbrothers probably came into my life when I was maybe 11, I would say. So already a bit older. And then I don't really talk about, or I certainly didn't talk about money with them. I now actually co-own a property with one of my stepbrothers. So cool. We talk about it in relation to the house that we have. But again, those conversations weren't necessarily shared as much. It's been a conversation that my dad and I have just had all the time over the years. And then my dad and my stepmom will be quite open with talking about money in front of us. And I think because I'm particularly interested and receptive, that just tends to naturally come up a lot more than it probably would in other dynamic situations.
Yeah, right. I mean, I love that the money's an open conversation in the household. That's very cool. As you know, it wasn't really for me growing up, and so, or maybe everyone's experienced it in different ways. So it's quite refreshing to hear, that that's the case for you. So I mean, you touched on one of these so far, and these two next questions will link together, but I'm keen to understand what the key money moments through your life have been. So if you were to give us an overview, what is the core memories? Purchasing a home, I assume, is one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the dog was a big core memory at the beginning. And then the next core memory, again, this one was really young. This one was, again, probably around about 10 or 11, was I saw a hamster toy in a window that was $200, and I saved up for that for ages, just doing odd jobs and stuff, got that amount of money, then was like, this is way too much to spend on a soft toy. And then I saw another, a bigger teddy bear that was $350. I was like, I'll save a bit further, get that. Then was like, that was so hard to get this money. I'm not going to spend it on a teddy bear. And then I got an opportunity to go on an overseas camp. And so then I think I ended up getting to probably $1,000 eventually, and was able to put that towards going on this overseas camp, which was really crazy at that age. And then I think the next moment was, again, there was an exchange in high school that I really wanted to go on and to Germany, and my parents said, well, if you want to do that, like if you can, I think I needed to cover the base cost of the trip, which was maybe like $4,000. And then they said, I think it was all up going to be maybe like $4,500 or $5,000. And so they said, get to 3,000 or 4,000 and then we'll top up the rest to get there, which was, hugely privileged. Not every person's family can do that, but I was able to save up and do that. And that at that age, I was about 16. And so to do that, I picked up a job in an ice cream shop and worked after school 1 day a week, and then generally 1 or 2 weekend days, and then did cleaning and sort of hustled. And so I just was building like lots of different cases of evidence of having a goal and being able to get there towards it, and then what it required to sacrifice in order to get there.
Yeah.
And then I think the next money milestone was I'd had a big gap year. I came back and I think I had $200 in my bank account, and I wanted to then go to university, but I was like, with what money?
With $200?
Yeah, absolutely not. So then I worked full time for a year, and then ended up working 7 days a week for about 4 months on end, but was able to scrape together $20,000 to start studying. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. This is so much money. And then put half of that in a term deposit, moved up to Auckland, started studying. And so I was like, right, the next thing is a house. And so I was just relentless in terms of saving for that. I would squirrel away as much as possible. At some points I would buy my groceries, like pay my rent, my electricity bills, and then I'd withdraw a $20 note, and that was what I had for the week to do anything else. So that at that time, that would get me like maybe 3 or 4 hot drinks out, or it might get me one nice breakfast on a weekend. But that was my only fun.
Such good
budget.
self-control.
It was like, I think, and we'll get to this later, like there was definitely elements in that where I was going way too extreme and wasn't being kind to myself and was a bit extreme, but I was so focused on, I really want this. And so after years of grinding, I managed to get together, I think I'd saved up $80,000, and this was all while studying full time. And I think I had 6 jobs as well at this point on top of uni. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I was really fortunate to get from a family member, I was gifted $50,000, which again, huge privilege. It was something they'd said, look, this was going to be something you would get way down the line when we're old, but I know you're really wanting to save a house, and you're someone who I think you'll actually benefit more from this money right now. And so
that's very cool of them. Yeah.
It was really, really cool. And
generous,
again, massive privilege. And so I was like, this is fantastic. I've got a good deposit for a house.
Yeah.
And then I went to all these banks, and then because by this point I'd also started my business, and that was less than a year old, and we weren't paying ourselves a huge amount of money. I think we were paying ourselves like 55 grand, and I hadn't, because I'd also been studying, my like year to date earnings was maybe more like 30,000 grand. And then every year prior, I would earn maybe $20,000 to $30,000 total, just because I'd been, studying.
Yeah.
And so that was quite disheartening, because every bank was like, we're not going to lend to you, you're too risky. And so even though it felt like blood, sweat and tears to scrape together a huge amount of money, it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So that was obviously quite crushing. And so it just kind of kept studying. And then the opportunity came up. My parents had one of their rentals, and then they were going to sell it. And then my stepbrother was also interested in getting on the property ladder. And he also worked for a bank, and then just dual income, you have a much better shot at being able to get lending.
Yeah.
And so we were able to buy the property off our parents, which meant it was a private sale, so we got a really good price for it. We paid around $600K in a time where this was 2021, so the market was insane. So that house was valued at $680, and if it had gone to auction, could have got more. So again, huge privilege. There is a lot of privilege that came into enabling me to get on the property ladder, but it was good, really cool that my brother and I could go in on that. And so we lived in that house for about 2 years, and then we had always had 2 to 3 flatmates with us as well, which meant paying off the mortgage was super cheap. I was paying, I need to remember, I was paying like $185 a week plus maybe another $100 for expenses. So around about like, let's just call it like 260, 280. I think 280, but then we do it fortnightly, but it was in any case way cheaper than anything I've ever paid in Auckland for a mortgage.
Can relate, yeah.
So that was really, really, really fortunate.
Can I ask, how much of a deposit did you have? Like, what percentage of the... at that point?
20%.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah, so we put in 20% just because the lending that you get is so much, like you could get the lower rates. Like at that point, pretty much most rates were around the 4% mark, and then we were able to fix them for quite a long period, which is nice. Two of our mortgages, because we split it into 3, still have 4s at the front. So
nice.
Really, really fortunate to be able to do that. But you couldn't access that if you had less than a 20% deposit.
Yeah, right. I mean, we'll probably get into property later, so I don't want to dig into it too much. But how did you decide to split it into 3 mortgages, and then like fixing for what time? How do you even approach that thought process?
Yeah, that was a really good question. To be honest, we did chat to my dad. My dad is because he's done so much with property. He's my go-to. And then like when my partner bought a house recently, so my dad was quite involved in that process. So he's got a lot of good thoughts to share. And so how we looked at it was we fixed one, I think on the 1 year you could get something like 2.8%. So we did that for 1 year, but we did that with the smallest chunk. So we put about $15,000 on the 2.89% one. Yeah. And then the next one we fixed for, I believe it was 4 years, because it comes off at the end of this year. And that was, I think it's around like 4.6 something. Yeah. And then the last one, which was the largest chunk, which was around, I think it was around like $320,000 mark. We fixed for 5 years because it was 4.8% or 4.89 maybe. Yeah. And my dad was like, this is actually a really good rate for 5 years. Yeah. I think you'll be really glad for that. And good call, Dad. Yeah. Nice and nice.
It's not the 7-8% that people are paying now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like that short-term loan is currently at 7%, but it's now it's under $15,000. So that's not greatly impacting our life, and it's nice knowing that the one that comes off at the end of the year will probably jump up a little bit, but that's okay, you know, like it's like a little piece at a time, and so the difference in the increase in cost is not huge.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I'm reading between the lines, but I guess the reason that you split up your mortgage is because like to reduce risk ultimately, like in terms of timeline and potentially it's like the fixed variable.
Yeah, I think at the time I didn't appreciate that as much. I think it was like, Dad says it's a good idea.
Okay, sure, we'll do that.
Like a little lamb following that. But now looking back, I absolutely understand the risk mitigation part of it, and being able to take advantage of what was historically low rates. Yeah. So I think, Dad was like, this is the lowest that I've seen in a really long time. Yeah. So, and it's all like, because they were at 2% for all, then by the time we bought it was at 4%. Yeah. And he was like, it's probably going to keep going up. And obviously there's a bit of a gamble there where with the long-term interest rates, the banks are betting that on an average, the market will go up and go down. So you do have to take that into account. But I think Dad was like, it's probably for a 4% mortgage, it's probably a risk worth taking. Yeah. So,
Thanks,
cool.
Dad.
Yeah.
Love that. Maybe we should get him on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. He does have some colourful language. So
even better.
Yeah, he's definitely Southland born and bred.
Funny, I love that. So going back, actually, before we do that, any other kind of pivotal moments from that point to now?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think what I guess I'm quite proud of is within buying a house and being able to set myself up financially there, I've also been able to invest quite a bit and travel as well. I haven't like all of these financial goals hasn't meant that I've needed to completely turn off all other aspects of my life, which I'm proud of, because up until like right now in this current season, I've never earned amazing money. You know, I've been growing a business, I've been investing in things, so I've never had huge amounts of money at my disposal. I've just been quite smart with how I managed it.
Yeah.
And so I've been able, throughout uni, I was able to go and spend 6 weeks in India and like look at scholarships and other funding, and went and studied Mandarin in Taiwan.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that about you. That's exciting.
Yeah. So I've been learning Mandarin for about 4 years now.
Yeah.
So that's just another hobby that I have on the side.
Nice.
And so I actually got a scholarship to go there for 3 months, but at around the same time I got offered my first marketing job at the Hilton, which was 20 hours a week, so I could do my uni alongside it, work with all the other small business clients that I was working with on their marketing. And it was like a good brand, and I was like, oh, this is actually a really good opportunity. And understandably, they were like, we can't give you 3 months, we can give you 5 weeks. And so I was like, done, best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Which I'm really glad I made that decision, and super grateful to them for letting me take the opportunity at all. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And then after that, for last year, I spent 4 months overseas traveling and working from there, which is partially due to the business. I was able to earn money whilst I was traveling, which meant I didn't have to have a huge amount saved.
Yeah.
I could just pay as I went. But I think it's been cool to look at what I've now got invested and have this property and be like, that's really cool that I've been able to make life happen around me as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, is starting the business a pivotal moment?
Yeah, I can't even think of that. Yes, yeah, honestly.
How did that happen? How did you decide to start a business?
So I was working with so many other small businesses doing their social media. How that started was when I got this scholarship to India. It was in the summer holidays, which was, mostly over the summer holidays at uni, which the problem with that is that's when, as a uni student, you hustle and save as much as possible.
That's true, yeah.
So that when when exam season hits, you can afford to pull back on all your jobs and focus on exams. Mm-hmm. And so I got that opportunity, and I'd already booked to go home to Christchurch to visit family for 2 weeks directly prior to that. And all of my, most of my jobs at the time required me being physically in Auckland. And so in Christchurch, on student job search, oh my God, what can I get that's in Christchurch or remote that I can just make money and save? Otherwise, I don't know how I'm going to eat next year.
Yeah.
And I found a woman who just needed someone to make a PowerPoint for her. And then I made some PowerPoints for her. And then she said, our marketing person is on leave. Do you want to be our marketing manager? And so I was like, yes, of course. So I picked that up. And then through her, I found a few other businesses, and then online. And then all of a sudden I had about 6 small businesses who I was doing their social media or updating their website or their blogs or designing PDFs, just kind of doing their SEO, whatever they needed. I would just think, okay, yep, I'll just learn how to do it and do that. So I was doing that, and my dad was like, oh, you should think about starting a business with it. But I was kind of unsure, and I was like, that was really overwhelming. And then my friend moved up to Auckland, and she'd always been very entrepreneurial. Her family also run a couple of businesses and have done really well with that. So she's always had a lot of business now. She moved to Auckland, and then at her birthday BYO, we were a bottle of wine deep, and we were like, we should start a business. And so then we put a calendar invite in our phones called Biz Chats for the following Tuesday. And on the morning, she messaged me and was like, are we doing this? I was like, yeah. And
we're doing
this. And so we met up and worked on, so that was 2019 July. And so then we worked on it every Tuesday evening from one of our flats, and then every Saturday we'd go to a cafe and then just work on the business. And then we incorporated it in January 2020. I think it cost us $1,000 each to start it by the time, lawyers' fees and incorporation. And then we just kind of started. We pulled in most of my clients, some of the small businesses, just with the nature of it being an agency and not a student on a casual rate, decided to not keep working with us, which was fine. But then we just got busier, and then COVID hit and we got even more busy. And the thing was, we'd started this business so that we could be digital nomads and travel, because we were like, this is great. It worked for me when I was in India. We could do this, just the two of us, set it up, bring on clients. And then, COVID time's not great for being a digital nomad, but it did mean that suddenly all of these businesses who previously had not prioritized their marketing realized, oh my God, we need an online presence.
Yeah.
And so it really took off. So my business partner went full-time in the business in June of 2020, and then I was full-time by December that year.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was I think like especially moving into our co-working space and everyone there just sort of assumed we were late 20s and then and then hearing like, oh, it's my birthday. Oh, how old are you turning? Oh, 24. Everyone's
like, what?
What are you doing here? That was pretty, I just think, to be honest, I feel like at that point we just had nothing to lose. You know, we were like, well, this is the least amount of responsibility we're ever going to have in our lives. We're so early on in our careers. If it doesn't work, I don't think any employer in future, if we decide to go back and get a job, is going to be like, oh, you ran your own business, lame.
Yeah.
So we were like, why not? Why not just give it a go?
Yeah.
Which was great. I'm so glad that we did that.
That's awesome. And it took you to move from city to city as well, right? So what happened there?
That was a complete accident, actually. So we had clients all over, and then we had one client down in Wanaka, and we were going to go and do a photo shoot for her. And we flew to Christchurch. We were going to pick up a family car in one of our family's cars because we were from there originally and drive down to Wanaka. And as I was boarding the flight, I saw in my group chat a message which was like, hey, have you guys heard about that Delta case? And I was like, that's weird. Put my phone away. An hour after landing, New Zealand went into the 2021 snap lockdown in August. And so we were with our families. We were like, well, why don't we just wait it out down here with our families and enjoy free food instead of going back to our very overfilled flats. I think my business partner's flat had like 10 people in it because everyone's like partners and friends came there. So we were like, we'll just wait it out. And
you just bunker down with everyone you know.
Literally. And so we were like, well, you could just stay down here.
Yeah.
And then Christchurch came out of lockdown after 3 weeks and Auckland stayed in lockdown for 6 months.
Yep.
So we were like, okay, we'll stay here. And then towards the end of that year, I know my business partner was wanting to head overseas the following year, and do a bit of a trip. We also needed to hire staff at that point. We were just working crazy hours, and it was hard because our dream was, going in the digital nomad direction, but the business was actually going in the staff growth office route. And I think it's really hard at that point to walk away from something that could be really good and it's going really well. And the business bros online will tell you that success is this and you've got to make sacrifice. And we were like, okay. But Auckland was still way too uncertain. So we just ended up making the call to set up in Christchurch with an office and a team, which I think we not regretted, but I think we were like, down the line, we kind of wished that we had just bit the bullet and gone back up to Auckland. Right, okay. Just because we really liked our lives up here. And in terms of the community here as well, it was a lot. There is a lot more of a marketing community up here, which we certainly missed when we were in Christchurch. And then my business partner went overseas for 9 months in 2022, and I just was like, oh my God, this is about to be a cold, cold winter. And so I signed up to a yoga studio and really made sure that I had a big support network around me because I was like, just got to get through.
Just grind it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were positives. It was really nice to be close to my family again. I think there's something to be said for after redefining your relationship as an adult with your family and learning to set boundaries and learning to have good communication. And I do feel like I really got that in that time, which I love. And had I been in Auckland the whole time, I don't think I ever would have really gotten there, because when you see people so intermittently or so infrequently, there's kind of no need, or you're just you don't notice it as much. But when you are seeing people more frequently, you're like, oh, okay, maybe our communication could be better. And it does feel like my communication with my family is really good, and those relationships are really strong, which I like.
Yeah, that's such a positive outcome. I mean, or byproduct of that scenario, I guess. That's awesome. So thinking about the business, the financial side of it, so I'm curious to dig into that a little bit. You mentioned that, the point at which you decide to grow the business, that going from just paying your 2 salaries to then having, I don't know if they were full-time employees or contractors or whatever, that's quite an added pressure, I would imagine, financially on the business, because not only you could just cut your own hours or just maybe work a few hours to make up. So how did you approach that from a financial point of view with the business?
Yeah, good question. basically my business partner and I worked ourselves to the bone and were billing having 90K plus months a couple of times and paying ourselves quite low at that point. I think we were building up a bit of a nest egg. So when it came time to bringing staff on, we had quite a buffer, so we could afford to do that. And so our first, in Christchurch, the first hires we'd had casual and part-time and contractors before, but we brought on a full-timer and a part-timer off the bat. And then we moved into an office space as well, which was staring down the barrel of that was scary. Definitely scary. And I think we just had this belief that we'll make it work. Don't get me wrong. We were definitely is this the right call? Is it not? Do we have to go? One big learning from starting this type of business is that cheap to start, expensive to scale. Because to scale really effectively, you need to pay good people. And being a small business and a startup, we brought on juniors and thought that's fine. We can coach the juniors, then they can do the work.
Yeah. Sounds like very agency. That's pretty traditional agency approach, right?
Yeah, definitely. But juniors just need a lot of support. And these guys were great. We had such a good team. And when we grew the team, we were just really fortunate to have people with an amazing attitude, really committed to the business, worked so hard. I actively had to, one of them, she would respond to my emails late at night and I would have to be please stop working. I am not paying you enough to be working right now. You need to stop. You can reply to me when it's your working hours.
Yeah.
And I had to tell her that probably about 10 times before she was finally okay, fine. So they were great, but they just needed support, which I understand. I mean, I can completely understand. I think in that moment, being inexperienced myself with bringing on staff, we had no processes. And so our poor staff came in and were oh, well, how do you do that? And then us being what do you mean how? We just do?
Yeah, it just happens.
Just do it. And realizing that's actually not helpful. And we know it because we've been working on it for 2 years now. We don't even really need to communicate that properly because we know the ins and outs, we know it so intimately. And so that was a big stumbling block to scaling. And then ongoing throughout the next few years of having staff, realizing how hard it was to be able to grow the business when we needed to be really hands-on with the team, because you've got to deliver great stuff to clients. And again, our team were doing great work, but when it's your first year of your full-time job, there are some things that you need support on or added feedback, and just input. You want that from your bosses, and absolutely fair enough, but just the time required and the time investment required to be able to do that is incredibly time consuming. And so the way out of that is having someone like a managing director or bringing on someone more senior. But then as soon as you're bringing that on,
it's a price tag.
Yeah, absolutely. They're wanting a 6-figure salary, and that is really confronting. So I think, we did that for 2 years, and then we decided to scale things back towards the end of last year, just with recession hitting and us deciding to kind of realizing that what we'd built was maybe not aligned with what the goals we had for ourselves. We didn't want to be in Christchurch, but the combination of that with something that was no longer financially viable in its current model, we decided to scale it back a little bit because of the financial realities. So in short, yes, certainly very expensive, and the margins, especially when you have quite creative, high intensity work that does need a lot of eyes across it, and it needs a lot of time and creative input, paired with client management and wanting to have those comms, it does mean that margins are actually quite small. And then you have clients who are why does this cost so much? And then you're really learning how to communicate value. So financially very expensive.
I have so many questions. How did you figure out what your hourly rate to charge out at would be, firstly as you two, and then bringing on what is the maths that you went through to say, okay, this costs us this amount, and then the salary costs this, the office costs this? Is that literally how you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was very much guesswork, and I think
ballpark-ish.
When we first started, we were 23. We'd been my business partner had worked full time for 1 year. I'd had all of my different jobs, but never seeing big budgets, never worked. I'd done a very brief stint as an intern in a PR agency, but you don't touch budgets at that level.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what things cost. And so looking back at our first packages, they're hilarious. Like I think our first Meta ads package was like $100 a month. And then the medium one was $300 a month. And then the most expensive one was like $500 a month, which we very quickly learned was terrible because you do so much work and then you're like, I am working 50 hours. Why are we making no money? Yeah. So we, changed that quite quickly, but that was just guesswork. And looking back at our first invoices, I'm like, our clients must have read those and been like, oh, they're so cute.
What a bargain.
Yeah, literally. So
this is daylight robbery.
Yes, so we outgrew that quite fast.
Yeah.
Then at the end, it was just a case of a big spreadsheet with these are all of our outgoings and these are the budgets that we have for how much do we want dedicated towards staff entertainment, what is our salary cost, what is our rent, looking at what the overall cost of running things are, then putting a margin on that and then, okay, cool, this is what we need to charge, and then changing the charge out rate based on the type of work and on the seniority as well. So for instance, there are certain things where there's a limit that people want to pay.
Yeah.
So for a single Instagram post, you kind of capped it how much you can charge for that because people are like, oh, come on, it does not cost that much. Even though that one post might have required the designer to design it, the designer to select a photo, the copywriter to put copy on the picture, and then put right copy for the post. Then it goes to the client, then they might have feedback, then it kind of goes through that round again, then it goes back. So there might have actually been a ridiculous amount of work going into the post, but for the client, they're like, that's just not worth my money.
Yeah.
And I get it, fair enough. So you do have to balance out with, okay, what are some things where we literally cannot charge more for that? And then what are things which are actually quite high value and feels like a fair value exchange for the clients as well.
Interesting. So how did you then get to a place where you felt confident explaining your value? Because I liken this to speaking to a lot of financial advisors, for example, and it's like, or any kind of service, like personal training, things like that, where it's a one-to-one or one-to-many kind of scenario where you really it's a service that you're providing, and the ROI might not feel like immediate, or it might feel like a big, how did you get through that kind of hump?
Oh, an ongoing journey. The big thing that helped though was itemizing things. So when you're putting together a proposal, itemizing everything, because then if you just write a whole bunch of deliverables and then put a price at the bottom, clients are like, that is a ludicrous amount of money. Whereas when you break it down line by line, then they see, oh, there is actually a lot involved in this, and I do see how that would be that price. And then the other good thing about itemizing is, as a professional services entity, especially as an agency, you're going to expect some kind of pushback. And so when you itemize things, it's easy for business to go, this looks awesome, we can actually handle animation in-house, so we can supply that. And it'll be like, that's great. There's a few providers in there, like it needs to be in the right specs and up to quality, but we can have that discussion. Or they might be like, okay, we'll actually handle the social media posting if you want to handle the paid side of things. And it just it opens the conversation, and it shows the client that, okay, these guys are transparent, and then they respect me and then my budget, and they've given me the option where I can manage things within my own costs and outgoings. So that's the big thing. I think people want to feel like they're getting value, and people want to feel like they know what they're paying for as well. And I think as soon as people feel like they have transparency, they're like, okay. And the conversation becomes less, oh, you're too expensive, and more, okay, right, that's all right. Maybe we can't afford this whole thing, but it's not pushing back as you're too expensive. It's, okay, how can we tailor this in line with our budget, which is a much different conversation to be having. Yeah,
it's interesting that detachment also probably for you as the business owner, the service provider, to be like, this is not a reflection of them thinking that my work isn't valuable. It's literally they have these bounds of this budget, and does it fit within it, yes or no? Exactly. Or how do they mold to make it fit? Exactly. Within, it's funny sitting on the client side. I'm like, yep, that's pretty much how it goes. So it's quite fascinating to hear the process behind it as well. In terms of funding the business, you mentioned at the start that you both put in kind of $1,000-ish. Has it been fully self-funded along the way?
Yeah. Like I know when there was a COVID business support loan or subsidy that was cheap, we did have that, which was great because it was interest-free for that first year, and that was awesome at that point. But that was the only thing really that we had when we moved into our largest office, which is like 100 square meters, and had a price tag to match. We did get a 20k overdraft. We didn't use it. It was more just as a security blanket, just because we were like, well, this is a big outgoing, we'll just protect ourselves. But yeah, the beast kind of fed itself, which was great. It didn't mean that there was always a lot of, necessarily like profit, depending on, what stage we were at in the business, which is just part of growing a business and being a startup and learning how to run things. Yeah. But yeah, we didn't have any outside investment, and it kind of grew. We did it, certain points need to change how much we were paying ourselves. Again, just dependent on maybe we're bringing on someone new, maybe we just need to play it safe. We were always quite proactive in that. We were both like, we would rather just take a hit on what we're paying ourselves for a couple of weeks than need to put money back in, because it just feels so much like, much more painful.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Good to know. So last question on the business, where is it at now and what is the kind of future? Like, are you doing the digital nomad thing or go back to that? What's the plans there?
That is a great question. This year, we've changed things up quite a bit, and we've set it up so that my business partner and I can manage our own sides of the business a bit more independently, just with that she's overseas for a little bit at the moment. And we've done that together for 4 years and had a great time. So we were just at the next evolution to change things up a little bit. Yeah. So currently how it looks is we both have our client pool, and we've both got the same access to, a lot of the resources that we had at the agency, and we're both managing that on the side. I've also taken on a short-term contract, which is 40 plus hours a week. It's very full on. It's only for 3 months. And that was more, I just was ready to try something new and see what it was like in-house. And I saw this pop up and was like, well, you know what, 3 months to give it a go and learn. Yeah. I was also quite keen to have some senior people around me. Starting a business at 23, I've been the most senior person in my business. And prior to that, I had that role at the Hilton, and my manager there was amazing. I'm still friends with her now. She was fantastic, but that was a long time ago, and I was just getting started. So I wanted to be around senior people, and this 3-month contract is great. I've got some really sharp people around me, and I feel like I am learning a lot. And also, coming from your own business and from a startup mindset, I'm like, I've gotten so much done there already, and I'm only 5 weeks in, and I'm like, oh my God, there's so much change, and I can just make it happen because I'm used to operating at this pace. Yeah. To the point where my manager is like, okay,
you can take a break.
Slow down. We've got to take everyone on the journey, but that's also cool, like that stakeholder management, because obviously having clients is stakeholder management, but with a client agency relationship, people come to you and they're like, well, you're the expert on this. You need to tell us what we want. First of all, you need to help people understand what you're doing and understand why we use emojis in LinkedIn posts and things like that. You need to educate people in the business, and
you're speaking to my soul right now.
Like, it's fine, I promise. So being able to educate people first so that get their buy-in and then create change. Because if you go in with it, cool, we're going to change this, and this, you get pushback. So that's been a really fun dynamic to do. In terms of what's next, I'm still working through that. All of the agency stuff will absolutely, keep doing. That's great. Right now, my plate is so full of workload, but again, short term. Yeah. But coming into this short term role and seeing being able to apply my skills there is really cool, and it's planting a few seeds on, do I want to go down looking into contract work or going into business transformation, because I do know I can come bring my skill set, bring my relationship management skills, and then because I've run a digital marketing agency, I'm across so many layers of marketing and marketing strategy, but then I can also run all of the ad platforms, and then I know enough about SEO and web development that even if I'm not doing it myself, I can talk to a web dev or talk to an SEO and be able to like speak the same language.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and even just having that inside view to the business, I think is quite like a valuable mindset that a lot of businesses would look for, especially in the startup scale up space. It's like you want people to be like operate like a business owner in the business. Yeah, so that's awesome. That sounds exciting.
It is exciting. It is exciting. I definitely, the end of last year when we were considering making the changes, and obviously the economic environment was also immensely stressful. That was hard. I really had to grieve what could have been.
Yeah.
But now, having so much possibility opened up, I'm actually so much more excited about what's ahead than the concept of what could have been, which is really cool. And I saw this great quote from Stephen Bartlett where so good, oh my God, but the only place that 100% certainty exists is in hindsight. And I was like, that's so true. And so I had no idea if we were making the right call last year, but now I am so happy with where I'm at and with what's ahead.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yay. Stoked for you as well. That's very exciting.
It feels good. It feels really good.
Oh, good. So backtracking a little bit to property, which I understand has been a big part of your journey so far. We talked about how you split the mortgage, and then, we touched a little bit on why you wanted to get into property in terms of it was influenced by your dad and like that as a way to get on the investment journey. But I guess I came to understand a little bit more of the financial side of it. Was it did you treat it like a first home? So did you use your KiwiSaver to purchase it? And you said you lived in it for a couple of years. So is that the assumption?
Yeah, well, for KiwiSaver purposes, it was first home because it made sense to be able to access that money. But otherwise, I was keen to spend as little as possible because I had no emotional investment in it. I was like, I know this is going to be an investment property. This is not the home. Yeah, completely. And so we renovated the kitchen, which was cool. That added value, and then otherwise just tidied up the garden, but didn't buy things. Even buying like fancy furniture and stuff, it was like, nope, if it's free on Marketplace or $50 on Marketplace, done.
Yeah.
So we finished it like that, and I was keen to spend as little on it as outside of what we absolutely needed to. I didn't want to spend anything on it. So very different to a first home approach. And so now that I've moved up to Auckland and my stepbrother's looking to head on his own way as well at some point. So we've both actually moved out of the property, and it's now fully tenanted out, which is exciting. And so we've got a property manager, which there's a lot of costs involved in just stuff like you don't expect, like, the hot water cylinder has a slight leak, we need to get that fixed up, and lots of little things that you need to fix to get it tenant ready.
Yeah.
And then sort of the first time you bring on a property manager, there's lots of ingoing costs. But moving forwards, the rent covers our mortgage and the property management costs, which is
nice.
So exciting. And we just keep an eye on it. And so if for rates, we might chuck in, an extra $100 each here and there just to make sure that we're covering ourselves. But very fortunate that the property is at a point where it's actually positively geared, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, that is awesome. Did you top up or pay off additional or make additional repayments to the principal along the way to get it to that point, or?
A little bit here and there. There was times where, someone would have their partner living in, and then we had a little bit more coming in, so we would top up a bit extra. But mostly we didn't. It was especially because we just thought, it's not, again, because we're not a couple and it's not our forever home, we were kind of okay with the fact with leaving the debt sort of sitting there.
Yeah.
So, we changed our strategy. We've got that one loan that is coming off at the end of the year that's sitting at, I think, 4.65. We have now bumped just that one up to the maximum repayments, mostly just because we're like, it's going to go up at the end of the year anyway. Kind of nice to just start paying that now and chip away at that particular loan, but otherwise just keeping it at the minimum repayments has been good. Honestly, having a low interest rate does make it quite easy for that to be chipped away at.
Yeah, awesome. Would you mind sharing what your total debt is and then the rent that you can get?
Yeah.
And then potentially the property management cost, just so to understand, like, how do you make it positively geared? Is it, that's what you say, right?
Yeah, I believe that's right too.
Yeah.
So our original mortgage was 480 grand, and I know we've paid off just over $20,000 worth of that. So it's actually it's more, maybe even more now. It's less than $460,000 across our mortgage, and then that's split between those three interest rates. And so each week our rent is $700, or the rent that we charge is $700 a week, which is $1,400 a fortnight. And then our property management fees are 9% or 9.5. I can't remember exactly. But they charge a 9.9 or 9.5%. And we did a lot of comparison because there are some that charge 9% and some that charge 8.5, but then they have other costs, like they charge more for inspections. So we went with the one that I think had the highest percentage management fee, but then there were a lot of inclusions, which actually made it the most affordable over the course of a year.
Yeah, right, okay.
And so I think from memory, our rent covers those costs. It's about $50 extra, which is not quite enough to cover, say, like insurance. So that will be the only one. Again, at the moment it's covering it, but it's just something we're conscious that we need to keep an eye on to make sure that there's enough in there. So we might need to add top-ups for certain things.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And how big's the house?
It is 3-bedroom plus a studio out the back. So when we were in there, my brother was living out in the studio. Because it is a studio, you can't advertise it as 4-bedroom, but it technically is. But the person who's moved in now runs an eyelashes studio out of it. So it's perfect.
Nice. That's quite convenient, yeah.
And it's got quite a bit, being Christchurch has quite a lot of yard, and then it's fully fenced, so they've got a little dog as well, which, it's, I mean, again, pretty crazy what you can get in Christchurch versus what you can get in Auckland in terms of square meterage and yard size, and it has a big garage and
for sure. Oh, sounds dreamy. Sounds like it's a lot bigger than the apartment that I live in for 600.
Yeah, it's very honestly, and we were lucky to get in when we did. Again, prices have dropped a lot since then, but the value is still sitting at, I think when I last looked, around 650 is the general market estimate for it, which makes sense. It's in an area that has been, years ago it was quite a rough suburb, but now it's kind of like how Greylin, Ponsonby was bougie first, and then Greylin is like
so
now really
catching
nice.
Up.
Yeah, that's what the suburb is kind of like. It's on the edge of like quite a posh suburb, and then this one, it's just a really nice sort of family neighbourhood now. And
cool.
Yeah.
What's the suburb?
Idaho.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't know if anyone listening that lives in Christchurch or knows it. Cool.
I call it Idaho / St Albans. St Albans is the posh one.
Okay. I definitely heard of that. Yeah. Love it. And so how did the co-ownership work?
Yeah, so we just got it legally drawn up, got our rental agreements and stuff in place, and property sharing agreement. Made sure that we just had that all signed and sealed, and we just know that we own 50% each of the property. So it's pretty simple. We don't obviously pull any money out of it because there's no money to pull out. Yeah. We had considered at some points, do we want to buy in together, but then we're probably just going to leave that one sitting and being an investment, and then we'll look to buy our own properties separately or with like our partners and stuff like that down the line.
Yeah, cool. And did you put equal amounts into the property?
Initially, I put in more, but then we're now evened out, which is
balanced out.
Yeah, which is really good. Yeah. So after the fact, my stepbrother then paid the other difference. So it's nice and clean and 50-50, which is great. Nice. It's really cool that we've now got this asset, which is awesome and is setting us up for future, whether we just keep it running as a rental property or if we do sell it down the line and just split everything equally after we've paid it off.
That's awesome. And so how is that potentially going to influence, or like, you mentioned maybe buying a house with your partner. Is that does it impact that decision?
Not, I was concerned about this, but because it's actually kind of good because it's they'll look at that debt, but then they'll see the rental income we're getting off it, and of offsets. At least that's my understanding. It does. I think the only thing is, when you have a property, ideally you use it as leverage to buy the second property. what I would really like to do is buy an investment property just on my own. So I feel like I have something that's mine. I feel like I like to set myself up and feel like I'm not dependent on anyone. So it would be nice to have something that's just mine. But we'll see in terms of the reality of that. But I'm confident that the other property wouldn't like hold me back, but it just means that I can't leverage it the way that the way that one usually would when you already own one property. But again, that's fine. It's just something that takes care of itself in the background, and that's super lucky as far as I see it.
Yeah, cool. Love it. Now moving on to investing in our health. This is something that we definitely bonded over. So, I mean, we recently did a podcast about how much Kat and I spend on our health and just like whether we generally think that it's worth it. And it kind of sparked a conversation between you and I and about how much you invest in your health and how it's a big priority for you. And so I would love, firstly, to give a bit of an overview to the listeners, if you don't mind, just based on our conversation, and then dig into some thoughts / questions. So for the listeners, Elise spends $16.99 per week, which is roughly $1,000 per year on an Anytime Fitness membership. So she's still at the student rate despite finishing uni in 2019. Anyone who works at Anytime Fitness, do not come our way.
Yeah, please. I've been a loyal customer this whole time.
And then she also pays $34 per week on a yoga studio membership. You briefly mentioned that before. Then you also pay $300 a month, which is $75 a week, for a coach, which you consider to be like pretty relatively expensive, but for you it's worth it. So that's a total of about $125-ish a week, which works out to be $6,500 per year on your health. That said, you do justify it by the fact that you are frugal in other areas. So you don't spend on clothes, you get your hair done once per year, also can relate. Don't wear much makeup and don't really drink much alcohol. So this is all health related. You also delay going to things like the doctor and physio and dentist because you feel guilty, which we'll get into. You also see a counsellor through Xero's ESP program for small business customers, which is awesome that they offer that. And then you don't have health insurance either. But you do spend a little bit more on healthy food. But even then you make sacrifices to like find good deals and or go to farm shops to keep your grocery spending to about $70 to $80 per week when you're shopping just for you. There's a lot in that. Do you want to give any more context before we dig in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing that I would say, especially when it comes to the guilt around spending on doctors and like those big outlays, is I have always had to be quite careful with my money, especially because there's been, over the past 4 or 5 years, there have been more times when I've been earning $50,000 to $70,000 than not. And then a lot of that has been at the lower end of that spectrum just for various reasons. Yeah. And so because I've also had these really big financial goals that I've prioritized, I've found it really hard to siphon away my, this is for investing or this is for a next property, to siphon money away from that pool to spend on other things, which that's where that mindset comes from. And that is something that I'm trying to shift. I have been a lot better with going to the doctor. That's where that comes from in terms of the spending on, I guess, the gym and on yoga studios and on the coach. Again, like I said, I was very scarcity mindset around it and would try and scrimp for years. And then the first thing, once I left uni, I was like, I really do love the gym and I can't go to the uni gym anymore. So I need to find something, and really enjoyed going to that particular gym. So I was like, okay, great, I'll spend money on that. And then when my business partner went overseas, that was when I thought, okay, this is going to be quite an isolating period. I know I'm going to be working a lot. I don't have as much of a community in Christchurch. I'm not also not going to have time to see them. I need something that I'm doing for me. And yoga from home, I could do it in lockdown, but otherwise I just can't. It just doesn't work for me. I get distracted. I procrastinate. It's like I need somewhere, a space to go. Yeah. So
and the structure, like the accountability of the classes at this time, show up, be there, and do it.
Yeah, and I don't have to think about it. And great. So that was when I signed up for that. That was in Christchurch. So since being in Auckland, and we're currently actually house sitting at the moment as well, which is another cost saving hack. Would you believe? I don't have any yoga membership. I also just don't have time. Like I'm working at the moment between my contract and my client work, I am doing like 70 hours a week. Yeah. So there's not a lot of space for that, but I know that I'll come back to it.
Yep.
And then with the coach, that was something I'd been following her for years, and I really wanted to work with her. Essentially, I had quite a crazy health journey where I had a lot of issues with periods growing up, and then I was misdiagnosed with polycystic ovaries, and then was told to like hold as little fat in my body as possible,
to manage PCOS.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
oh.
And so then ended up also getting at the same time really into fitness and was like crazy fit and strong without needing to try. And then anyway, found out that I actually had a tumour on my pituitary gland. So then I had brain surgery around the same time we started the business.
Oh my!
I know.
Oh, whoa!
I know. It's been a roller coaster. It's been so crazy.
Wow.
And so I, came back from that. But then what was pretty much what happened is because I also got super lean throughout that process, because like the tumour that I had secreted growth hormone. So it was like being on steroids naturally.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
I was so buff. Like it was, I was so buff.
That's so interesting that can have that impact.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so it pretty much just, disrupts all your hormones. But also because I was so lean, what I actually also had was hypothalamic amenorrhea, where your hypothalamus thinks we're in a season of famine. It's not safe to bring a child into the world. We're going to shut down all of your hormones as well. So even after I had the tumour out, I then had to heal from HA, which is essentially you have to really cut back on your exercise. You have to really make sure that you're eating a lot more food than you actually need to get your body to feel safe enough to turn all those functions back on.
Yeah.
And so that was an ongoing journey. And I first found this coach because she used to work with women exclusively who were trying to get their period back and moderate their exercise, because I was used to being someone who's got a bit of an all or nothing mindset, and then also having the ability, thanks to this extra hormone, to be able to go.
Also, just to clarify, in terms of like exercise, it would drive, growth in that way, but would it also like mean that you had additional energy to like just literally function at a high level?
Pretty much. I just didn't need to recover. So I was training. Training for half marathon and going to the gym. So I was doing probably 10 to 20k runs a week.
Wow.
Plus on the other days working. I was also doing uni and working 30 hours a week. And going to the gym 6 days a week. So I just could keep going. I didn't need to rest. And then I was also kind of addicted to that. So I really needed to moderate that back. And I knew that she worked in that space and helped people with that. And then she transitioned out of it, and she just worked with women in the gym and on weightlifting, which is something I enjoy.
Yeah, nice.
But her whole philosophy was you need to have had at least like 6 months of regular periods before you can start getting into that kind of training. So I just was like, okay, this is a goal, and this is because it's really hard to stay motivated when the way that you get your period back when you're in that space is by not overdoing it. Or like you can train, but you can't go to your max effort. You've got to operate at 40%, and that's hard because you're mentally having to hold yourself back and have discipline. It's not like if you've got a sore leg and your leg hurts when you overdo it. With this, it's all mental, and that's really tough. And it was incredibly demotivating at times because you don't know, and then you stress like, have I overdone it? And then like the stress from overdoing it,
it's a sick cycle. Yeah.
And so getting to a stage where physiologically I was able to work with her was like, oh my God, this is a huge moment. Like I've got my health back to such a good point, which has been, a 4-year journey. And like I've managed that despite having this business and despite having a lot of other lifestyle stress. I need to recognize that.
For sure.
And so I just, then after coming back from overseas as well, I was also feeling like I needed to mix things up. So I just was like, I need to do this. I need to reward myself. Otherwise, it's really easy to just keep going to this goal that I had actually wasn't good enough. So I'm going to just wait till the next one to reward it. That is why I justified that. And honestly, I'm so glad. It's been really motivating. I can finally do pull-ups now.
Oh, that's so cool.
And like my squats are so much better, and I can do chest to floor push-ups. So it's just been like,
I'm impressed.
Very satisfying. Honestly, I feel great, and it's been so cool working with her, but also cool because the fact that I can work with her is a recognition of getting myself financially into a place where I can afford it, into a place mentally where I can like allow myself to spend on that, and then physically where I actually have the health to be able to work with her.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Well, congrats. Like, it
Thank
sounds like
you.
it's been a long journey to get here and to, be able to almost rebuild in a lot of ways. So that's like a huge accomplishment in itself. Do you see her like once a week, or is it like how does that work? Because I mean, for the listeners of the pod, I just have started seeing a PT, which I also said I would never say on the podcast because it feels so ridiculous. But because I also want to improve my like weightlifting and strength and all that kind of stuff. So how do you what's the arrangement there?
Yeah, so she's actually based in Australia. So she programs things online through an app, and then I can just send her videos throughout the week of form, or if I have questions, and then she just responds to the videos of the form.
Nice.
And then we have a call once a week as well.
Cool.
Because I've been training already for quite a good time, like quite a long time. So when I first started going to the gym, I did have an in-person PT at the uni gym who was cheaper than like what you pay outside of the uni environment.
Yeah.
But when I first got into it, I went to him a lot. So, and that was great to have someone in person because then I knew a lot of the basic form cues. So I think if I were at the beginning of my journey, I would prefer to do in person, but because I already have experience online, it's just form tweaks, which you can do in the video, and I don't need to have someone physically there. So it works really well. And it's actually really great being able to just send ad hoc videos rather than
have an hour a week, or nice. And I guess it is the kind of the consistency of the full, anytime kind of thing, and then you've got your accountability of that call. That's awesome. And so you said that you were getting a bit better at spending on doctors.
Yes, I've been much better this year, or a little bit more proactive, where I don't know, you fall off the wagon, you have mistakes. Like earlier in the year, I diagnosed myself as having warts on my hand. I don't know why. I just decided that, no, these are warts. And so I bought this, went to the chemist warehouse and then bought this wart serum thing and then applied it. And then it just, I got all of these disgusting big chemical burns on my hand. And my partner was like, after about a week of it looked like I had leprosy or something. It was so bad. And my partner's like, stop. He actually confiscated the little serum thing from me because he's like, you need to stop and you need to go to the doctor. And so then I went to the doctor and I was like, so she gave me something else to help heal it. And I was like, what if the warts come back? And she's like, I just don't think they were ever warts. And I was like, okay, got it.
You're like, okay, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been a little bit better at that and a bit more proactive that, I've got a concern, I'll just book it in and go. I use Tend, which I love. It's such a good service because
I also use Tend,
it's so handy because you don't necessarily have to go in, especially if it's just like I've got a question or I can send a photo. That's been amazing as well. So I'm kind of like, there's actually no excuse, because sometimes it'll be like, I'm just too stressed, I'm too busy to go, I can't get there. But now I'm like, there's actually no excuse. I can do it online in a lunch break or before work or in between times. Like there's no reason for me to do it from a time perspective. The dentist, I haven't crossed that bridge yet. I'm working on it. I'm building up.
Fair enough. Well, I can completely relate to you in terms of, because I also hate the dentist and also delayed it and finally overcame that hurdle like a month ago. And it's you do feel quite like, just so much better, and you're like, okay, I'm on top of my health and things like that. But it's also not without a cost. Like, I think it cost me, and I don't know if this is expensive, so any listeners of the pod, let us know. It was $150 to go for a checkup, and then $175 or $70 to see the hygienist. And they say you should see the hygienist twice a year. And I'm like, I'm sorry, how am I affording this? Like, it's just so much money. But then also, your dental hygiene is important as well. But yeah, all of these things can really add up. But I do, just to round out on the health piece, a question around the guilt piece, because I struggle to understand why I feel so guilty with spending sometimes. Have you dug into why that is? Do you think it comes back to your kind of early money habits and beliefs?
I think it definitely comes from a bit of a scarcity mindset that you need to save your money or else it's going to go. Because I think the flip side of having really open conversations with your family about stuff is the language that was used was just like, oh, everything's so expensive, or, oh no, like, you can't ever get the nice things, like that's just expensive. And so I just would feel so many times when making a purchase, I would just hear my dad's voice in my head and be like, oh, I just won't get it then. No, I'm being too lavish, I'm being ridiculous. And so that feeling of like, oh, money needs to be held really close. Like money, you really need to like grasp it and not let it go out anywhere. And I've really struggled to reconcile that with things you hear about, like abundance mindset and like money flows. And then I'm really like, but how do you make money flow? And then also be like, oh no, but like I'm dedicating enough to my goals and I'm putting aside this kind of percentage each week. And I find that very jarring. And I am trying to have try to be a lot more abundant about it, because for me, I've always said, like, I want to have a lot of money. I want to be financially free. And a big part about that is I want to be generous. I want to be able to take my family or take friends out and be like, you know what, I've got this. Or, if a friend is ever in a tough situation, like be able to be like, actually, like I can get this, just pay me back whenever. Or, give to charity and give to causes and do good things with my money. But to be able to do that, I need to believe that my own needs are met. And because, again, there's that intrinsic mindset from, money is something you need to hold on to. And then with the, I guess, added thing of previously having not had a lot of money. Again, like right now I'm in a seat between having client load and a business that's ticking away and then a full-time contract. Like I'm in an amazing financial income position right now at this point in my life, but this is a first for me. And it's like, even right now, I'm still, with the amount of outgoings that I have, I'm still spending my money as if I'm making, like 50 grand, and then everything else is just getting funneled elsewhere. So I think it's a combination of like actual availability of assets and then an ongoing belief that money is limited.
I guess there's also the layer of like starting your own business, because that's uncertain. And so I can understand how like not having, like you have to pitch for clients and that kind of thing, right? So to then generate revenue for the business, and then you want to have a buffer and all that kind of stuff. So I can understand how now having a contract, which is like you get a set paycheck every month or fortnight, whatever, for the certain amount of time, you maybe feel a bit flush with cash. So thank you for sharing that. It's like nice reminder really for me, but also maybe for some of the listeners that might be struggling with that as well. Just to round out, because I appreciate it's been some time, quick fire money situation questions, because I think it's good to just give people a snapshot of where you're at. And I mean, I'm not going to ask about the property because we kind of said about that earlier, but what does your budget look like weekly outside of health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spend I've got my numbers here.
Love this.
So I spend about 16% on food and entertainment. So that includes groceries, eating out, and then I kind of lump other entertainment in there. Like, I don't know if I go to the movies or do something like that. And then up until recently, 26% on mortgage and house bills. But currently I'm house sitting for 3 months, so there are no outgoings on that front, which is quite cool.
Love it.
And then generally save and invest around 40%. I've had to scale that back to like 35, depending on how much I've been making. But generally it's always set at 40%, 14% on health related things and 4% on other bills. Currently because my take-home pay is so high, I'm actually investing or saving 80%, which is ludicrous. But it's also really cool. It feels like, oh my God, wow, this is amazing. I can really accelerate some of the goals that I have. The only thing is I'm like, oh, do I want an investment property, or do I need to catch up on investing? And so I'm kind of weirdly trying to do both, which is, maybe not the best thing to do strategically, but I think just from a mental standpoint, it feels that way. Again, I think there's been an element of worrying that you're behind, especially because I've watched, people around me climb the pay scale a lot. And I think with business and things, it's more of a slingshot. You get pulled, you're held back a lot further, and then when you're released, you shoot forwards. But having gone through a very long and drawn out like pullback period,
you're catapulting now.
Yeah, and it's like, which is like, oh, finally. But it's just adjusting to that, and I'm very much scared of lifestyle creep. So I think that's why, instead of people have been like, what are you going to do now, with extra money coming in? And I'm like, oh, put it away. No, I don't want to do it. But I can also see, I don't know, like for instance, I always buy the cheap canned tomatoes, and I said to my partner, he's like, are you okay with cheap canned tomatoes? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like I'm never going to buy more expensive ones. And then I couldn't get that particular can open because at our house the can opener doesn't work, and they had the Mutti brand, the really bougie one with the little pull tag. So I was like, I'll just use this and replace it later. And I used that and poured it in, and I was like, oh my God, I might be at risk of buying expensive canned tomatoes. Like honestly, so vibrant and red. And then I looked at the tin, and it's because that brand, it's 99% tomatoes, and then the budget brand, it's 60% tomatoes.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah.
And valuing your health, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that might be an element of lifestyle creep. But yeah, I'm currently navigating that.
Yeah.
What that looks like in terms of my money management is I never have any money sitting on my checking account. So I put aside roughly each fortnight like $140 into the entertainment account, which again covers eating out and other entertainment, and then $140 a fortnight into groceries.
Yep.
And those are kind of used dual, because I might not spend $70 in groceries each week, or some of that might go, if we eat out, will go towards that, but that's roughly how I split it out. And then bills, I put $200 a week into there because it's got to cover all of the health related things like gym expenses and PT and those sorts of things. Up until recently, car, but I also sold my car when I moved up, and my partner and I are just sharing the one car at the moment, so that cost is a lot less. And then I put a certain amount aside towards, I've got an account which is managed funds, and then I've got a portfolio of various ETFs and index funds, and then one REIT, and it goes into there, and then it gets auto invest distributed amongst the different allocations that I've set out. I then have a travel fund, and I've got recently, because I've just before starting this contract and a few other outgoings, I burnt out through my emergency fund, but I've built that back up now. So I've got $5,000 that I can access immediately, and then another $5,000 that I could pull out within a day or two. Nice. And then I've got a term deposit as well sitting there of about $10K, which was I've saved $10K. I'm not 100% sure what to do with that yet, but I'll just whack it in a good term deposit for 9 months, because I think it was 6.15%. And I was wow. That's a good rate. That's a good share market return, but it's not at risk for a short amount of time. So I've just popped it in there.
Nice. Sounds great. Sounds like you're all over it. That's awesome. It's
good. It definitely. Oh, I also have a splash cash account, which generally gets $30 a week in it, and that generally just accumulates. Right now I really want a fancy water bottle, so I'm just building up funds for that. And then I have a Christmas presents account, which gets $40 a fortnight, and then that just builds up. And then if I've got a birthday or but the idea is that by Christmas there's actually a bit of a chunk in there, so then I buy Christmas presents out of it. But also Christmas is just expensive because you eat out a lot, and you have these fancy dinners and drinks, and then that comes from the Christmas account. So that's the other one that I have.
How much time would you say that you kind of spend managing or checking in on your finances?
I would say I look at my bank accounts way too often. I look at them every day at least, and then I look at my shares. Again, I look at my shares probably a couple times a week, which I'm trying to wean myself off, because my strategy with them is it's a long game. I'm not looking to, I'm just dollar cost averaging across, low cost broad market index funds. I should not be checking it. I just can't help myself. I might need to delete the app off my phone. So with those, I just don't tend to try not to touch them. In terms of finance, I don't spend actually all that long doing it. It's just when my pay comes in, and because I've got two sources. I've got what I pay myself as an employee from the business, just because it's easier for tax purposes and easier with my student loan, things like that. So that pay comes in, and then my current pay from the contract comes in, and then I've got it noted down in my notes what all the splits should be, and then I just transfer them myself. I've never had an AP, just because the payday has always shifted slightly over the few years, and especially now with me paying myself. So I just do it on my own. I feel like the next evolution would be actually tracking things in a spreadsheet and being a bit more organized like that. I'm not there yet. Because I'm so controlled with how I have to transfer every time I want to buy something, that means that I'm not, I do have a grasp of how much I'm spending all the time, but I think it would be better to be more intentional, especially because I haven't adjusted my budgets or my allowances for inflation, and so it's a lot harder to get by on what is essentially a $70 a week entertainment budget than it was a few years ago, and it just means that I end up sacrificing more things, which I'm okay with, but I think at some point I do need to be a bit kinder to myself and give myself a little bit more to play with.
Yes, inflation adjust. Yeah, I think it's a nice way to think about it. Yeah. It's very true though. Okay, last question, hopefully. So financial goals, you've kind of touched on them a little bit, and then you also touched on index funds and managed funds and then the term deposit and things like that. What is that all are you investing towards a particular goal? Are you saving towards a particular goal? What's kind of happening in that space? Yeah,
this is again something I could be a lot more intentional with. I think from an investing standpoint, my goal is to have a $2 million invested by the time I retire, or ideally a bit earlier. It'd be great to have that in my 50s, because then the idea is that I would just live off, that's just a passive income. I think not adjusted for inflation, it's around about 70 or 80k a year, which is that's awesome passive income to have at that age. And then you have retirement things, and Kiwis will be built up by that point. So and I'll ideally also have rental properties. So that's the goal with the investing.
Just to clarify, is that $2 million outside of KiwiSaver and property?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. This is ambitious. Yeah. I like it.
I know. Big dreams. Yeah, so that's the goal there. And then my KiwiSaver is, I don't really have a set goal on that. I just, currently it's invested, it's, growth because I've used it already for property. So it's just aggressive growth because I've got a long time. And then as retirement. So as I get close, older and closer to retirement, then I'll just slowly scale back the level of risk that it's invested in. So I just let that happen. Currently I just contribute the minimum amount with the current contract because it was a short-term thing. I thought I actually kind of want to give this a bit of an injection, so I have my contribution set to 4%, but otherwise it's all just sitting at the 3% minimum because I'd rather have the rest of the money to go elsewhere. Yeah. And then property, ideally, I've got written down on my goals, it'd be great to have 6 investment properties. That would be the goal. And so I'm looking at currently, just with all of the changes in bright line tests, there's a lot of properties coming to the market that are quite affordable now. I'm just I've got about $30,000 sitting currently in just a high interest savings account, and I'm contributing towards that, but I'm also contributing towards my investments, and I'm I'd love to aggressively build that to try and get a cheaper, smaller investment property. I'm okay with it being more of a yield rather than a growth one, because I'm essentially, because I would just get one and then let that sit for a few years and go and do other things and then build up a pool to get another property. But I'm not 100% certain yet on what I'm doing there. So I could be a lot clearer on that. I'm just I just don't really know what to do. Yes, I could, if I pulled all of my money out of my investment portfolios, I could absolutely buy another property. But then I'm that doesn't align with the goal of the investment portfolio that I want, in terms of shares and index funds. And that also is just moving things from one investment to another, which from my logical brain knows doesn't make sense. So yeah, I'm just kind of wrestling at the moment with what to do with this pile of money that I do have, that I'm currently it's okay because at least it's, earning 4.5% interest, but it could be better elsewhere. But then am I investing saving for a property? I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. I can definitely relate in that we are in this kind of stage of life where there's a lot of pathways that we could take in terms of also life goals, career, outside of life, outside of work, investing, buying a house, investing in shares, whatever. And so completely understand that could be challenging to navigate. But it sounds like you're on the right track and, making headway, which is great.
Thank you. I think it's, again, I'm not very good at recognizing the milestones and the achievements. I'm a sucker for, I read about the arrival fallacy. It's like when I get to this point, then it's going to be great. And then I feel like there's been a few of those milestones, and then I'm just like, oh, well, that wasn't really a big deal, was it? On to the next one.
Yeah, right.
And then you just end up feeling like you've never arrived, or that whole comparison is a thief of joy, feeling like, oh yeah, I've got here, but big deal, other people are doing better. And it's really easy to slip into that, I've noticed. But I think everyone does that. Like, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's currently working in a hospital in Nepal, about to go to Munich to present at a conference.
Oh, wow.
He's 25 and has like been featured at lots of international conferences, and then he's like, oh, but he's studying med and he's had a few years to like study, do an extra and honours, and then go and do all these amazing things, and he's like, oh, but I'm worried that I'm 2 years behind my classmates. And I'm like, you were in Nepal going to Everest Base Camp, like you were speaking in Munich at a conference, like an international global conference of like professionals who were like 40 years into a career. But it just really struck me that, oh God, we all do it. We all can be, it doesn't matter how on paper well we're doing on paper. It's really easy to fall into a trap of like, oh, but other people are doing other things, or maybe I'm behind in this other area.
Totally. And I mean, you don't know what you don't know in terms of, you don't know what asset base he has or the investment choices that they've made. And so like, yeah, it is very easy to be hard on yourself without having the full context, especially when you're an outsider looking in, right? I also struggle with this, so I can relate. Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Elise, for being so open and honest. I honestly think that you have been the most in-depth money moments guest that we've ever had, which I really appreciate. So, and I'm sure the listener does too. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. Like, I love talking about money, and I think especially young people, and then especially women, I really want to be open about this, because so often I hear people like, oh, I don't have enough, or I can't make it work, or gotta find, like, what's that trending sound, like trust fund finance. Like, no, you don't.
6-5.
Yeah, like, no, you can be your own trust fund. It is possible, and you don't have to be earning huge amounts of money. You can put stuff away. I mean, 100% there are, like, I've had a lot of privilege that has meant that I have been able to save that some people don't have, but you can make like quite amazing things happen with even just putting a little bit aside. And yeah, it's just like chipping away at things slowly. Like, honestly, I was so impatient in uni and like so gutted that I couldn't get a house just then. But I also realized I had really unrealistic expectations of how much I could achieve in that period, and even with the business and everything. And then now, looking back and like 5 years on, I'm like, wow, I did achieve so many things in 5 years, but I was expecting to achieve a lot in one. And it's that saying is so true. You overestimate what you can do in 1 year and underestimate what you can achieve in 5. And
or 10, yeah.
Or 10, 100%. And I think it's like, just because you can't get to a goal as fast as you would like, or as fast as someone else, doesn't mean that you will never get there. You just have to keep putting a little bit towards it and trying and like set yourself up. I think I want to share, and I want to see all people, and especially women, like be able to stand on their own 2 feet. There's an amazing quote in the Girls That Invest book, which is, a bird does not fear the branch breaking beneath it because it has wings. And I see that as cool. No matter what situation you find yourself in, if you're in a job that doesn't serve you, if you're in a relationship that doesn't work, money is never the reason that you have to stay. You can always get yourself out, and you can always be able to look after yourself.
Love that. Thank you. So much wisdom. I really appreciate it. I honestly could just keep talking and talking and talking So before we jump off, do you want to give your business a bit of a shout out?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so Brand Sitters, you can find us brandsitters.co.nz, or you can just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, Elise Dalrymple Keast. You might need to look at the show notes for how to spell my last name, because it's a lot. And
the services you provide are?
Yeah, so we do more so social media consultancy, social media strategy, overall digital marketing strategy, and then paid media. So paid ads across LinkedIn, Meta, Google, and a bit of a paid overview. Quite often at the moment in a recession environment, businesses are keen to do what they can in-house, but they just need someone to cut out the noise and be like, focus on this. And so I find at the moment we're doing a lot of like, okay, cool, here are your priorities, here's how to do it, here's the rollout plan.
Yeah, nice. Love that. Cool. Well, yeah, so brainsitters.co.nz. Yeah, if anyone wants those services. Otherwise, if you have any questions about today's episode or you want to get in touch with Elise, even though you can go to direct her on LinkedIn at It's No Secret NZ on Instagram, we would love to hear any questions. We can also pass them on to Elise if you want to dig into a specific part. But otherwise, thank you for listening and we will talk to you next week.